Let's bring in Secretary Wolf now. Secretary, I thought it was refreshing, and your approach yesterday to saying there were problems, you were on top of them, and you were trying to make them right. But it really isn't business as usual, and you were asking people to be patient as we try to get people back in the country.
That's absolutely right. Over the weekend, we screened close to 64,000 individuals, medically screened those individuals at our funneling airports. So it was a big task. We stepped up. Our officers, our CBP officers, as well as our medical contract staff really stepped up. They did a tremendous job. And what we saw over Sunday is about a 27-minute average wait time across our funneling airports, which say we're doing our job, we're doing it well, we're processing passengers through. And I think what's important is for those individuals and those Americans coming back into the country, knowing that they are going to be looked at, they're going to have a questionnaire, we're going to take some information from them to be able to track them should they get sick. But we're also going to provide that medical screening. So as they come into the country, they're going to be seen by professionals, and we're going to continue to do that from affected areas, as the president has outlined. Were
there any patterns that you noticed yesterday as people, obviously there was a lot of frustration, and we know that, and you acknowledged that and said that the department is trying to get on top of it. You heard reports that some things were uneven, like some passengers were just being able to go right through and others were held for a long time. But was there a pattern that you found of people that did have symptoms across the country?
There wasn't any one pattern, but yes, the process is going to be a little standardized, but then a little different depending on what our medical professionals are seeing. Should they be referred to CDC, who's going to ask them a series of questions, additional questions, and then continue to look at these passengers as they come in from affected areas. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to do random temperature checks and, again, do a very intensive screening process. The president has been very clear. His direction has been very clear to me as well, is to make sure that we are screening passengers as they come back into the country. At times that may mean a little waiting, but we want to make sure that we get this right, that we lean into it, and again are providing that security to the American people.
Tell me about our neighbor to the north, Canada, making some announcements today and how it might affect us.
Sure. So I talked to Minister Blair from Canada earlier today. They're taking a number of steps very similar to ours. I think where they're going a little bit above and beyond, as we are restricting individuals from certain countries. They're restricting individuals from every country, is my understanding. So the only individuals they're letting back into Canada are Canadian citizens at the moment, or as soon as those measures are in place. So that's the little difference that we have. That exempts the U.S. You've made very clear that it doesn't apply to U.S. citizens going into Canada, given our special relationship. But what we see across the world really is a number of countries following suit, following the lead of the U.S. and putting a number of restrictions in place. And so as the U.S. and as the President and the Vice President lead this effort, we'll continue to look at what restrictions that we need to put in place to protect the American people, whether that's international travel restrictions or other restrictions. We need to keep all options on the table, and we'll continue to do that.
Tell me about how your team is approaching, like, obviously this is priority number one, but there are vulnerabilities that we have in order to protect our homeland. We have to be looking at all things. We know that about the cyber attack against Health and Human Services last night. How are you tasking your team with making sure that we are protecting against all sorts of threats that come towards the homeland?
Well, it's certainly an all-hazards department, and so we have a lot of bandwidth. We continue to look at all the threats facing the department and the homeland, and obviously COVID-19 is certainly one of those. So we have a number of our components who are doing their traditional mission, but they're also layering over the threats and the vulnerabilities and the risk of this particular virus, and they'll continue to do that. As you mentioned, election security, we see a number of states postponing primaries, so we've got to take a look at that. We see a number of phishing campaigns and other scams out there in the cyber domain trying to take advantage of this crisis, so we're taking a look at that. And really across the board, from TSA to CBP to USCIS to FEMA, Coast Guard, we're all involved in the response to this this crisis, as well as our traditional responsibilities. So we continue to do a lot. FEMA is stepping up. They're getting more and more involved.
They're going to have to, indeed.
And we look forward to that.
All right, Chad Wolf, the Acting Secretary for Homeland Security, we thank you and thank all of your people there that work at DHS on behalf of Americans. We appreciate it.